The black and white checkered floor gleamed wet from rain tracked in by desperate travelers seeking shelter, neon lights above buzzing and flickering in that broken rhythm that belongs only to all-night diners, casting red and blue shadows across every surface like a heartbeat that refused to stop. The smell of stale coffee mixed with the metallic bite of ozone from lightning strikes outside, and the clock on the wall read 3:22 in the morning. Aria Harper moved between tables with a grace that did not match her circumstances, her fingers wrapped in band-aids from washing dishes for cash under the table, cash that barely filled the gaps between eviction notices and grocery store receipts that never added up. She carried a coffee pot like it weighed 1,000 pounds, pouring with shaking hands for the man in the corner booth, the one who arrived alone while thunder cracked the sky open. Giovanni Calabrese sat with his shoulders squared against the world, his expensive black suit rain-soaked and clinging to a chest carved from decades of decisions that had cost other people everything. His dark eyes, the color of storm clouds before hail falls, scanned the empty diner with the precision of someone who had learned to see threats in empty spaces. Two men stood by the door, Vinny and Dario, their suits matching their bosses, their posture identical, their silence the kind that comes from years of understanding each other without words. The coffee cup froze halfway to Giovanni's lips when the sound came from the back storage room, small and terrified and speaking in a voice like a child pulled from sleep. "Mommy, I'm scared." The word hung in the air like a blade wrapped in ice. Giovanni's entire body went rigid. The cup stopped moving. His men exchanged a look that held 15 years of searching, 15 years of a wound that would not close, 15 years of a brother's betrayal that had carved a canyon through Giovanni's chest. The storage room door creaked open and Emma appeared, 7 years old with dark eyes that matched the man in the corner booth in a way that could not be coincidence, wrapped in Aria's only blanket, the one she used when sleeping in her car in the parking lot behind the gas station 3 miles away. Thunder cracked directly overhead, so loud the neon lights flickered and dimmed. Aria moved instantly, her body stepping between the child and the stranger like she was made of iron instead of desperation. "It's okay, baby. Just the storm. Just the sound." Emma wrapped herself tighter in the blanket. "It sounds like when the building was on fire. It sounds like breaking." Giovanni did not move. His hands remained on the table. His breathing remained steady. But his eyes had become the eyes of a different man entirely, a man who had forgotten how to exist in a world where Emma was alive and standing in front of him wearing a blanket that belonged to a stranger who loved her more than she loved her own survival. One of the fluorescent lights overhead popped, casting the diner into a moment of deeper darkness before the backup lighting engaged, and in that moment Giovanni's lieutenants felt something in the air shift, something fundamental and dangerous and utterly unprecedented. "What is your name?" Giovanni asked, and his voice came out like venom mixed with honey, like thunder speaking in a low register. "Aria," she said. She did not step back. Her hands remained in sight. She had learned long ago that men like this one did not need reasons to become violent, but they could sometimes be delayed by compliance. "Her name is Emma. We were waiting for the rain to stop." "How long have you had her?" The question was not a question. It was a vault being cracked open by someone who knew every combination. 6 months, Aria said. The truth came out of her mouth like a confession. "I pulled her from the shelter fire on 7th Avenue. They said no one had claimed her. She was alone. She didn't have anyone." Giovanni closed his eyes. His hands remained on the table, but his fingers became fists so tight that his knuckles turned white and then bone white and then the color of death. When he opened his eyes again, they were looking at Emma like she was the answer to a prayer he had stopped believing in making. "What happened to you, little one?" His voice had changed. It was still deep and solid like an oath, but now it held something else, something that had no name in any language, something that made Vinny and Dario exchange another look, this one carrying the weight of impossible things. Emma stepped closer to Aria. "They said Mommy wasn't my real mommy because she didn't have the papers. A man called Douglas said bad things about her. He said she stole me. But she saved me from the fire. She wrapped me in her coat and carried me out, and the coat was on fire but she didn't let go." The silence that followed stretched like taffy being pulled, and in that silence, the sound of rain beating against the diner windows became the only thing that existed. Giovanni looked at Aria like she had done something impossible, something that had rearranged the entire structure of his understanding about who deserved mercy and who did not. In the back pocket of Aria's apron, crumpled and soft from being touched 100 times a day, was a foreclosure notice. Storage unit auction in 14 days. $22,000 owed. Every proof of Aria's identity locked inside. Every custody document for Emma locked inside. The last evidence that anything in her life had ever been real. She had $34 in her pocket. 34. She had 13 days left. She had been rationing her food to 2 meals a day so Emma could have 3. She had not slept in 4 days. She had been working double shifts at the diner and the grocery store and the car wash under different names so Douglas could not find her, could not track her, could not prove that he was right when he told every police officer who would listen that she was a thief and a liar and a danger to the child she had wrapped in a blanket and hidden in a storage room at 3:22 in the morning during a thunderstorm. "What is that?" Giovanni asked, and his eyes had shifted to the pocket of her apron where the paper protruded like a disease diagnosis. Aria's hand moved to cover it instinctively, but it was too late. Giovanni already knew. Men like Giovanni Calabrese could smell desperation the way sharks could smell blood in water from miles away. "It is nothing," she said. "Do not lie to me." She pulled it out. Her fingers unfolded it slowly, and the paper crackled like breaking bones. $22,000. 14 days. Storage unit for 47C at the West Side facility. Everything she owned in the world, which meant everything Emma owned, which meant everything that proved Emma belonged to anyone at all. Giovanni read the notice without touching it. When he looked up, something dangerous and cold had entered his expression, something that made Vinny take one step closer to the door and Dario's hand moved toward his jacket. But Giovanni raised one hand, and both men stopped moving. He reached into his jacket slowly, like he was handling something fragile, and removed a phone that cost more than Aria's car. He dialed without looking at the keypad. When someone answered on the first ring, because people always answered when Giovanni Calabrese called, he spoke 5 words. "I need the address." And in those 5 words, Aria Harper did not know it yet, but everything had changed. The man sitting across from her was not just a man in an expensive suit anymore. He was something larger and older and more dangerous, a man who had spent 8 years looking for a child he had lost, a man who had built an empire with his hands and his will and his refusal to accept that some losses could not be recovered. And the moment he learned that Emma was alive, the moment he understood that Aria had loved her enough to set herself on fire, something ancient and primitive and absolutely unstoppable had awakened inside his chest. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. Now, let us go back to the beginning, to the moment when Aria Harper had $34 and 14 days and absolutely no idea that salvation sometimes arrives wearing an expensive suit and carrying secrets that cost lives. 14 days earlier, the sun had risen over Los Angeles like it always did, indifferent to the people sleeping in cars in parking lots behind gas stations, indifferent to the small child wrapped in a blanket in the back seat, indifferent to the foreclosure notice that had already been written before Aria woke up to face another day. 14 days earlier, the sun had not yet risen over Los Angeles when Aria Harper's eyes opened in the darkness of her Honda Civic. 5:47 in the morning. She knew the exact time without looking at her phone because her body had learned to wake before dawn, before the world stirred, before anyone could see her sleeping in a parking lot behind a Chevron station on Sunset Boulevard. The backseat held everything that mattered. Emma lay curled under a thin blanket, her small body rising and falling with the steady breath of deep sleep. 8 years old and she could sleep anywhere now, in cars and motels and the backseats of strangers' vehicles. Emma had learned not to ask questions about where they were or why. Emma had learned to be invisible, just like her mother. Aria pushed open the driver's side door quietly, careful not to wake the child. The November air bit at her skin, cold and sharp. She walked to the bathroom on the side of the gas station, her reflection catching in the darkened windows as she passed. A woman looking back at her who seemed to belong to someone else entirely. Hollow eyes. Hair that had not seen a salon in 4 years. Skin the color of exhaustion. Inside the bathroom, she locked the door and ran the faucet until water came out. The soap smelled like artificial flowers and chemicals. She washed her face first, then her armpits with a corner of paper towel, then the back of her neck where sweat collected during her shifts. This was her shower now. This was her spa. This was the life of someone with $34 in the world. When she returned to the car, Emma was awake, sitting up in the back seat with her stuffed rabbit pressed against her chest. The rabbit had no name. Emma called it Rabbit. It had been white once. Now it was the color of old milk. "Good morning, baby," Aria whispered, sliding back into the driver's seat. "Did you sleep okay?" "I had a dream about the house," Emma said. "The one with the red door." Aria's chest tightened. The house with the red door was gone. Everything was gone. She reached back and squeezed Emma's small hand. "That's a good dream. Let's hold on to that one." She changed Emma's clothes in the back seat, shielding the small body from the view of the occasional trucker who passed by, moving quickly, efficiently. Clean underwear from the plastic bag they kept tucked under the seat. A shirt without stains. Aria had washed them in a gas station sink 3 days ago. Then came the hardest part of the morning. The mathematics of survival. She spread the bills and coins across the dashboard like a fortune teller reading cards. 1 $10 bill. 2 5s. A handful of singles. $34.63. That was all. "Mama, can we get breakfast?" Emma's voice was small, hopeful. Aria pulled a muffin from the chevron bag they had kept in the car since yesterday. "Blueberry." She broke it in half with her hands. The crumbs fell onto the dashboard like snow. She gave the larger half to Emma and ate the smaller piece slowly, making it last, making it mean something. "This is good," Emma said, not because it was good but because she understood now, at 8 years old, that good was relative. Good was breakfast. Good was not being cold. Good was her mother's hand holding hers. 6 months ago, Aria had pulled this child from a burning shelter on a night when the siren screamed and the sky turned orange. The paperwork had still been inside. The custody documents proving that Emma had been placed with her, that this child belonged to her by law if not by blood. All of it had burned. The roof had collapsed at 7:42 in the evening, and everything that proved Emma was hers had turned to ash. But Emma knew the truth. Aria knew the truth. And in 2 weeks, none of it would matter because they would have nothing left at all. The foreclosure notice was taped to her storage unit, Unit 247, bright yellow paper sealed with tape that would not tear. She had seen it 3 days ago when she checked on the unit, desperately hoping the deadline had been a mistake. It had not been a mistake. Final notice, the letter read. Amount due, $22,000. Auction date, 14 days from this date. Inside that unit was her life before the burning shelter. A box of photographs. A high school diploma. Emma's original birth certificate, the one that had been filled out at the hospital before the world had torn them apart. Clothing that fit her now. Shoes without holes. Everything that proved Aria Harper had existed before she became invisible. $22,000. 14 days. $34 on a dashboard in Los Angeles. She had done the math 100 times. She had whispered it to herself in the darkness when she could not sleep. She had calculated it while standing on her feet for 6 hours at the diner, while stacking boxes of cereal at the grocery store, while pushing a mop through office buildings that belonged to people whose names she would never know. $21,966.37 separated her daughter from proving that she was real. Aria worked 3 jobs. The diner from midnight to 6 in the morning, her legs aching, her back screaming, serving coffee to men in suits who looked through her as if she were made of glass. The grocery store from 7 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, scanning items, stocking shelves, moving fast enough that her manager would not notice her taking water from the employee bathroom to drink instead of paying for bottles. The office building cleaning crew from 4 in the evening until 9 at night, pushing a cart through hallways, wiping down desks that held coffee cups worth more than her car payment. The grocery store manager had handed her $73 in cash 5 days ago for 6 days of work. No paperwork. No questions. This was how she existed now, in the margins, in the shadows, paid in cash that could not be tracked. 3 weeks ago, Douglas Hale had found her. She had been pushing her cart through the cereal aisle at the grocery store, her head down, her movement small and careful, when she saw the silver Lexus pull into the parking lot. His silver Lexus. The one he had always kept spotless, the one he had driven the night he had pushed her into the bathroom mirror and told her that no one would believe her because she was nobody, just a girl who had run away from home at 17 and never told anyone why. Her entire body had gone cold. Her hands had started shaking so violently that she had dropped the mop, and it had clattered against the tile with a sound like a gunshot in the fluorescent silence. She had walked directly to the back room, told the manager she was sick, and left through the employee exit. She had taken Emma out of the car in a hurry, driven 4 miles to a different parking lot, and spent the night with the doors locked and her phone off, terrified that Douglas would find the vehicle because Douglas always found what he was looking for. The scars on her back had ached in the humidity that night, a map of his hands, his anger, his refusal to let her leave. They still ached now, 2 years after she had finally run far enough. Some kinds of pain did not go away just because you stopped looking at them. Now, with Emma strapped into the back seat and $34 on the dashboard, Aria drove toward the storage facility. The morning traffic had started to thicken around her, thousands of cars carrying thousands of people to jobs that paid their rent, that paid their mortgages, that kept them housed like human beings instead of ghosts. Unit 247 sat at the end of the corridor, climate-controlled space that she paid for with money she did not have. The foreclosure notice was still there, yellow and final and absolute. She did not go inside. She could not bear to see what she was losing. She stood in front of the unit for 11 minutes, Emma's hand in hers, and tried to calculate a way out of the mathematics that would not shift, that would not bend, that would not break. 14 days, she thought. 14 days to save $22,000. 14 days before everything that proved she existed turned into someone else's storage unit inventory at an auction where no one would care who had owned any of it before. She turned away from the unit and walked toward her car. She did not know that in exactly 8 hours and 50 minutes, her life was going to change completely. The rain hit like a hammer against the windshield, the kind of summer storm that turns Los Angeles into something prehistoric and violent. Giovanni Calabri sat in the corner booth of an all-night diner on Alameda Street, the only light for blocks, watching water stream down the windows in the way it obscured everything beyond. The checkered floor gleamed under neon tubes that hummed like tired insects. His coffee sat untouched, steam rising from the black surface, and his hands rested flat on the table, expensive watch, silver rings, a map of power written in metal. Outside, lightning fractured the sky purple-white. Inside, the diner held maybe 5 other people, an old man reading yesterday's newspaper, a couple in the corner booth not speaking to each other, and behind the counter, a waitress with exhausted eyes and band-aids on her fingers. Vinny and Dario had followed him in 2 minutes later, soaking wet, their suits clinging to them like second skin. They positioned themselves by the door the way men do when they are always ready for violence. They had been with Giovanni for 15 years, long enough to know that when he said he needed to drive alone, what he meant was that he needed to drive and think about the daughter he had lost 8 years ago. The waitress approached with a pot of coffee. She moved carefully, the way people move when they are carrying exhaustion, like it is something breakable inside them. She refilled his cup without asking, without meeting his eyes. "Thank you," Giovanni said, and his voice came out like thunder, deep and solid like an oath. She nodded, turned away, and that was when everything changed. Emma's voice came from somewhere behind the counter, small and frightened, calling out into the thunder. "Miss Aria, when does the storm end?" Giovanni's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. His entire body went absolutely still, the way a predator goes still when it hears prey. The waitress moved fast, blocking the doorway with her body, stammering words that tumbled over each other. She's just a kid I'm watching. She's scared of the storm. She'll be quiet. I'm sorry. She'll be quiet. But Emma appeared anyway, 8 years old, dark curly hair clinging to her forehead with sweat, eyes the exact shade as Giovanni's eyes, genetic certainty written in a face he hadn't seen since she was 8 months old. The child looked at this dangerous man in the corner booth and said nothing, just held onto the waitress's leg. Giovanni stood slowly, and Vinny's hand moved toward his jacket, and Dario stepped forward, and the waitress put her body between them, and the child like her body was the only weapon she had. Giovanni raised his hand, and everyone stopped. "What is her name?" His voice had gone quiet. Quieter than quiet. It was the voice of a man who had learned that the most dangerous things in the world whisper. The waitress hesitated. You could see the calculation happening behind her eyes, how much to tell, how much to hold back, whether this man in the expensive suit was salvation or another kind of predator. "Emma," she whispered. "Emma Calabrese." The words landed like a blade through his heart. Vinny caught the booth edge to steady himself. Dario's face went pale. In 15 years of working for Giovanni Calabrese, they had never seen him show anything like this, the way his hands trembled, the way his breathing changed. "Sit," Giovanni said to the waitress. It wasn't a request. She sat, and he sat across from her, and for a moment nobody spoke. The storm raged outside. The diner hummed. Emma climbed into the booth beside the waitress and stared at this man like she was trying to remember something from a dream. "My name is Aria Harper," the waitress said, her voice barely a whisper. "I pulled Emma from a burning shelter 6 months ago. There was a fire, and I pulled her out, and I've been trying to keep her safe, but I lost all the paperwork. I have nothing proving custody, nothing proving who I am, and in 2 weeks my storage unit gets auctioned for $22,000 and everything that proves I exist is inside it." Giovanni listened without interrupting. His eyes never left her face. "I have $34, Aria continued, and the way she said it, you could hear the mathematics of desperation. $34 to my name. I sleep in my car in a parking lot behind a gas station. I wash my face in bathroom sinks. And I've been trying so hard to keep her alive, to keep her safe, and in 2 weeks everything ends." "Why would you do this?" Giovanni asked. "Why would you take a child that is not yours?" Aria's hand found Emma's hair. She stroked it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Because she was burning. And nobody else was coming to save her. Something cold and dangerous stirred in Giovanni's chest. It was not anger. It was recognition. It was the terrible understanding that this woman, this nobody with $34 and band-aids on her fingers, had done what he had failed to do. She had saved his daughter. "I can get you the $22,000 tonight," Giovanni said. His voice came out like venom, like thunder, like a weapon being unsheathed. "I can make the problem disappear by morning. But you need to trust me." Aria stared at him. You could see her running the calculations. Was this man real, or was he another kind of trap? Emma tugged her sleeve, and in a voice that carried the weight of 8 years of loss, she said one word. "Mommy, I'm tired." The word mommy landed like a bomb. It was innocent. It was devastating. It was the thing Giovanni had thought he would never hear again, and it came not from the child he had lost but from this woman who had found her instead. The diner door opened. Headlight swept across the windows from the parking lot. A silver Lexus, engine running, and through the rain you could see a man getting out, tall, muscular, moving with the kind of anger that has teeth. Aria's face went white. Her hand tightened on Emma's shoulder. "He found us," she whispered. "Oh God. Douglas found us." Behind them, Vinny was already moving toward the door. Dario's hand disappeared into his jacket. And Giovanni rose from the booth like he was made of stone, his expression hardening into something that looked like death having a physical form. "Stay here," he said to Aria. But the man outside had already reached the diner door, and the rain hammered down like judgment, and somewhere in the distance, the storm kept screaming. Douglas Hale stood in the diner doorway at 3:27 in the morning, rain streaming off his shoulders, his 6'2" frame filling the space like a physical threat. He was 38 years old but carried himself like a man who had never aged past 25, muscular in that way that comes from gym obsession rather than actual labor, his jawline sharp, his eyes the color of winter water, cold and empty and searching. He wore an expensive black jacket over a polo shirt, the kind of casual wealth that belongs to men who have never had to think about money, and when those winter eyes swept across the diner, they locked on Aria like a blade finding its mark. His smile was beautiful and terrible. "There you are, baby," Douglas said, his voice so friendly it sounded like poison wrapped in honey. "Been looking everywhere." Aria pushed Emma behind her. The child's small hand gripped her shirt, and Aria could feel the trembling radiating through that tiny fist. Her own voice came out shattered like glass. "You need to leave, Douglas. Right now." He laughed. He actually laughed, as if she had told him a joke at a dinner party instead of ordering him out of a diner at 3 in the morning. "Still playing house with someone else's kid? You stole her, Aria. Police are looking for you. I've got the paperwork right here." He pulled a crumpled foreclosure notice from his jacket pocket, the same notice that had been in her car, the same car he had broken into 2 hours ago, pouring through her belongings like he had the right to touch anything that belonged to her. His fingers had been on her most private things. The thought made her skin crawl like insects were moving under it. "That's none of your business," Aria said. "None of my business? You're running around with a stolen child, working under the table, no address, no custody papers, and you're telling me it's none of my business." He took a step forward, and every muscle in Aria's body went rigid. "You're committing a felony, and you're embarrassing yourself, which embarrasses me, and I can't have that." Giovanni Calabrese stood from the booth without a sound. He rose like stone being carved upward, deliberate and immense, and positioned himself between Douglas and Aria. His cashmere coat hung open. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the chest, showing skin tanned the color of old gold, and his presence filled the space like weather, heavy and dangerous and inescapable. Douglas finally looked at him. For a moment, just a moment, his confidence wavered. He was a man used to being the most powerful person in every room, and that illusion cracked like ice under weight. "Who the hell are you?" Douglas asked. Giovanni did not answer. Instead, he turned to Aria, his voice steady and absolute like an oath carved into stone. "Take Emma to the back. Lock the door." "Giovanni," Aria started. "Now," he said. Not angry. Just immobile, like the decision had already been made and the universe was simply catching up to it. Aria hesitated for one more second, looking at this man she had known for 45 minutes, this stranger with the scar running from his eye to his cheekbone, these hands that had held Emma like she was something sacred. She took Emma's hand and walked toward the kitchen, her legs moving like they belonged to someone else's body. Behind her, she heard Douglas laugh again. "So you're the new boyfriend? You move on quick, Aria, I'll give you that. What's your name, pal?" Giovanni did not answer. Vinny and Dario shifted position with the kind of synchronized movement that only came from years of working in the same ecosystem of violence. They blocked the exit so smoothly that Douglas would not have noticed unless he was looking for it, and by then it was far too late to look for anything at all. "You know what," Douglas said, his voice climbing now, losing that honey coating. "I don't appreciate the attitude. I know people. Deputy Chief Marks is my golf buddy. I could make one phone call right now, and you'll be in county by dawn." Giovanni's hand moved like water, catching Douglas by the chest, stopping him cold without appearing to move at all. The rain hammered against the windows like it was trying to break through glass. "No," Giovanni said, his voice deep and solid like an oath. "You won't." Douglas shoved him backward. The man was strong, genuinely, objectively strong, and for a moment Giovanni actually moved. Just an inch. Just enough to let Douglas believe something might be possible. Then Giovanni stopped moving, and Douglas kept coming forward, and it became immediately apparent that he had been pushing against a wall. The diner door opened. The rain opened like a mouth, and through it came movement. Black SUVs arrived silently through the downpour, their engines barely audible, and 12 men in tactical gear emerged with FBI emblazoned in white letters across their chests. Their weapons were not drawn, but their purpose was evident in every step, in the way they moved like men who had rehearsed this exact moment 100 times. Douglas turned white. Actually white, like someone had reached into his chest and pulled out every drop of color his body could produce. "What is this?" His voice had changed. The friendliness was gone. The confidence was gone. All that remained was panic, raw and exposed like a nerve. "I didn't do anything." "I didn't, Chief Marks, heel." The lead agent, a woman in her 50s with gray threading through her dark hair and eyes that had seen every variety of human cruelty, stepped forward. She read from a paper in her hand like she was reading a grocery list, completely unmoved by the man's disintegration. "Douglas Hale, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, blackmail, assault across state lines, corruption of public officials, and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent." They had everything. 8 years of medical records from emergency rooms where Aria had appeared with injuries that did not match her explanations. Police reports that Douglas had buried in filing systems, replaced with documents that made her the aggressor and him the victim. Wire transfers to cops, including Deputy Chief Marks, with amounts and dates documented in perfect accounting. Surveillance footage from 3 different angles of Douglas breaking into Aria's car in the parking lot behind the gas station, his fingers on her foreclosure notice, his hand on her steering wheel, his violation captured in grayscale and timestamp. They snapped handcuffs on him with a kind of finality that death must feel like. "Federal prison," the lead agent said. 40 years minimum. "Tell it to the judge." They led him out at 3:42 in the morning, and when they reached the parking lot, news cameras rolled. Local stations had gotten the tip somehow, maybe someone in the federal building had talked, maybe someone wanted to make sure this story got out, and Douglas Hale's face was being broadcast on every channel in the city, in handcuffs, screaming about lawyers and mistakes. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away, Evelyn Blackwell's Malibu estate erupted in simultaneous chaos. FBI agents arrived with warrants the size of novels, and Evelyn opened the door expecting to see lawyers or possibly the governor. Instead she got armed federal agents, and she screamed. She screamed about connections and resources and how they could not possibly understand who she was dealing with. But they could. They could and they did. Her computers were seized. Her files were opened. Evidence spilled out like black water, years of blackmail material collected on women Giovanni had shown interest in, harassment campaigns orchestrated through her society connections, court officials bribed with donations and benefits, custody cases manipulated on behalf of abusive men who had the money to pay her rates. The press that she had courted so carefully, the tabloids and magazines that had made her a style icon, turned on her with the speed of predators recognizing wounded prey. By noon, her face was everywhere. Not the carefully composed photographs from charity galas. These were mugshots. These were security footage from her office showing her reviewing documents labeled with women's names and addresses. These were email chains with judges. Socialite exposed, the headline screamed. Downfall. Corruption. Every charity that had courted her for her donations dropped her name. Every country club sent letters of revocation. The courthouse connections who had been so eager to help her suddenly became very eager to testify against her in exchange for immunity. The public image she had constructed over 20 years, the only thing she had ever actually loved, disintegrated like paper in fire. Back at the diner, in the storage room where cleaning supplies and backup napkins were stacked in cardboard boxes, Aria sat on the floor with Emma against her chest. The child had fallen back into an exhausted sleep the moment they closed the door, her small body limp with the weight of fear finally releasing. Above them, the rain hammered on the roof like it wanted to break through the building, and Aria's entire body shook, not from cold but from terror being metabolized into something else, something that tasted like survival. She thought about running. Right now. grab Emma, go out the back door, leave Los Angeles, leave California, find somewhere that Douglas could not reach, somewhere that Evelyn could not touch, somewhere that a man like Giovanni could not find her, and realize he had made a terrible mistake. Because nobody ever stayed. Nobody ever actually stayed. She had learned that lesson so thoroughly that it lived in her bones. Her hands shook so hard she could barely hold Emma's small form. What if Giovanni changed his mind? What if this was just a game to him, and men like him got bored quickly? What if he realized that she was worthless, that Emma was not actually his daughter, that there was nothing here worth protecting? She was nobody. She had $34. She had no address, no legal identity, nothing to offer anyone except the weight of her problems and the burden of her survival. She stood on legs that felt like water and grabbed her backpack. The one she kept packed at all times, the emergency escape route that had kept her alive so far. Emma's hand caught her sleeve. "Don't go, Mommy," the child whispered, half asleep, not understanding where she was or what was happening, just knowing that the person who meant safety was leaving. "I like it here." Aria froze. The word Mommy landed like a bomb. It was innocent. It was the simplest word a child could speak. And it shattered something in Aria's chest that she had spent 8 years trying to keep intact. She slid down the wall and held Emma against her body and cried for the first time in 2 years, her whole frame breaking open like something that had been frozen finally thawing. When she looked up, Giovanni stood in the doorway. He had changed clothes. His white shirt was gone, replaced with a simple grey sweater that made his eyes look like storm clouds, and he carried 2 blankets and a pillow. Behind him, Vinny stood guard. Behind Vinny, the world outside the diner was being dismantled, police cars and federal vehicles and the machinery of justice finally turning in her direction instead of against it. Giovanni said nothing. He simply sat down on the concrete floor next to her, his expensive pants getting dirty without hesitation, and when he spoke, his voice came out like a prayer. "It is over, Aria." Aria could not speak. Could not move. Could barely breathe because breathing felt like a luxury she had never been allowed to have before. "The police have him," Giovanni continued. "Federal agents. 40 years they will give him. His corruption network is being arrested right now in coordinated strikes across the entire city. Deputy Chief Marks is in handcuffs as we speak. Every cop he paid, every official he influenced, they are falling like dominoes." The rain kept falling. The city kept spinning. And in the storage room of a diner at 3:52 in the morning, a man who controlled the underworld of Los Angeles sat on the floor and pulled Aria and Emma against his chest like they were something precious enough to protect with his own body. Family is not always bound by blood but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. The hotel room was silent except for the sound of Aria's breathing, shallow and measured like she was afraid to disturb the peace. Clean white sheets. A bed that did not smell like gasoline and desperation. Emma lay curled against her side, one small hand wrapped around Aria's wrist, still sleeping the deep sleep of a child who finally felt safe. Aria did not move. She lay there watching the morning light creep across the ceiling, terrified that if she breathed too hard, if she shifted even an inch, this would dissolve. That she would wake in the back seat of her car and discover that the rain, the diner, Giovanni Calabrese, all of it had been a dream constructed by her exhausted mind. The knock came at 7:43 in the morning. 3 measured taps on the door. Aria's body went rigid. Emma stirred but did not wake. When Aria opened the door, Vinny stood in the hallway holding a manila envelope. His suit was immaculate as always, charcoal grey with a silver tie, but his expression was softer than she had seen it, almost apologetic. "Boss's orders," he said, and handed her the envelope without stepping inside. $22,000 for the storage unit. 15 more for first month's rent and security deposit on an apartment. Keys are in there. Clean building in Silver Lake. Safe neighborhood. Good schools for the girl. Aria's hand shook so badly she nearly dropped it. "I can't." "You can," Vinny said. "And you will. Boss doesn't give gifts that people refuse." He turned to leave, then paused. He's handling some things this morning. Legal things. He'll see you this afternoon. Then he walked down the hallway with the quiet efficiency of a man who had delivered messages that changed lives before. Aria stood in the doorway holding $37,000 in cash and could not breathe. While Aria stood frozen in the hotel room, Giovanni sat in a glass-walled office on the 42nd floor of a building that bore no name on the directory. Dario sat beside him. Across the desk sat a lawyer named Mitchell, 61 years old with silver hair and the careful demeanor of a man who had learned long ago never to ask questions he did not want answered. The biological father petition, Mitchell said, sliding papers across the desk. Emergency custody filing, based on the documentation you've provided. Testimony from Ms. Harper about rescuing the child from the shelter. Character witnesses. Background verification. We have statements from the social worker who processed the intake, the firefighters who pulled her from the building 8 years ago. He paused. The timeline is complicated, but legally sound. The child was abandoned. You've subsequently provided documentation proving paternity. The courts move slowly in adoption cases, but emergency custody can be expedited. Giovanni's jaw tightened as he read. 8 years. 8 years this girl had lived in the world and he had been unaware she existed. 8 years his brother had kept her from him, hidden her in a shelter as punishment for daring to love someone Evelyn had decided he should not love. What about her? Mitchell asked, nodding toward the implied reference to Aria. Her role in the petition? Giovanni looked up from the papers. His eyes were storm gray and entirely still. Joint custody. She wants it, I will make it happen. Whatever role she wants to play, she plays it. Mitchell nodded like this was the most natural thing in the world. Perhaps in his experience, it was. I'll begin filing this afternoon. The expedited hearing should come through within 2 weeks. Giovanni did not look back at the papers. He was looking out the window at the city sprawling below him, every block of it under his control, every corner staffed with men who would die at his word, and none of it mattered because the only thing he wanted was something he could not force into submission, a woman's choice to stay. The park was green and ordinary, the kind of place where nothing violent could ever happen. Children played on swings while parents watched from benches. Emma pumped her legs with fierce concentration, trying to touch the sky. When Aria arrived, walking slowly across the grass, Giovanni was sitting on a bench with his hands folded on his lap like he was trying to take up as little space as possible. She has been here for 14 minutes, he said without preamble. She laughed 3 times. Real laughs, not the careful ones she does when she is afraid of being too loud. He paused. This is good, I think. Aria sat beside him, the envelope still in her hands. She had not been able to put it down since Vinny left. She held it out. I can't accept this, she said. Her hand was shaking. It's too much. I didn't do anything to earn. You ran into a burning building, Giovanni said quietly. For a child that was not yours. You lived in a car for 6 months to keep her safe. You stood between her and a man twice your size with nothing but your body and your refusal to break. He turned to look at her fully. His scar caught the sunlight. You did everything. I did almost nothing. Do not insult me by refusing the smallest fraction of recompense. Aria could not speak. Her throat had sealed shut. Giovanni did not look away. Emma calls you mommy, he said. She dreams about you. She touches her own arm where you have the scar and asks if you are okay. That means something to me. That means everything. Emma jumped from the swing and ran toward them, her small body moving like light. She launched herself at Giovanni, who caught her with the instinctive grace of a man holding something breakable. He lifted her and held her against his chest while she babbled about the swing and how high she had gone and whether she could have ice cream because she was very brave. When Emma saw the expression on Aria's face, she went still. What is wrong? Nothing is wrong, Aria said, and rolled up her sleeve. The scars on her wrist caught the light, the thin white lines like a map of fire and survival. She showed them to Emma without flinching. "See? Still here. Still protecting you." Emma touched the scars with one small finger, confused but accepting. Then she grabbed Aria's hand and pulled her toward the playground. Giovanni watched them go, his expression unreadable except for the rigidity of his jaw. Later, when Emma had exhausted herself and was coloring pictures on a blanket spread across the grass, Giovanni made his offer. His voice was careful, each word measured like he was diffusing something explosive. "Joint custody," he said. "If you want it. I will pay for the apartment. First year, all of it. Second year, we adjust. You go to school if you want. Paralegal certification takes 2 years. I can arrange it so you attend during Emma's school hours." He paused. "No obligations. No pressure. If you want to take the money and disappear, I will give you enough to start over anywhere. California, New York, anywhere. The choice is yours." Aria watched Emma color. The child's tongue was sticking out slightly in concentration, the tip of it visible between her teeth. She was wearing a pink dress that had been brought to the hotel that morning, already in her size somehow, and her hair was clean. "Why?" Aria asked. "You could just take her. You have lawyers. You have the money. You have everything. Why include me?" Giovanni was quiet for so long that Aria thought he would not answer. Then he said, "Because Emma needs you. Because you need this. Because the night you walked into that diner, you saved my life in a way you will never fully understand. My brother took her 8 years ago as punishment. For 8 years, I have been half a man, half a ghost. You kept her alive. You kept her safe. You kept the part of me that matters most alive while I was too broken to know I needed saving." He turned to look at her fully. "And because I will not be like the men who came before me. I will not take things. I will not destroy and rebuild and pretend it is love. If you want to stay, you stay because you choose it. If you want to leave, you leave with enough money to never look back. But either way, Emma knows that someone chose her. That is the thing no one ever gave me, Aria. I am giving it to her. And I am hoping that person is you." Aria broke apart. Not small tears, but the kind of weeping that comes from somewhere beneath words, from the place where 8 years of survival finally meets the possibility that survival could become something more. Giovanni did not touch her. He simply sat beside her while Emma abandoned her coloring to crawl into Aria's lap, patting her face with small hands and asking, "Why are you sad?" "I'm not sad," Aria whispered. "I'm happy. I'm just remembering how to be happy." 6 months later, the apartment in Silver Lake had Aria's books stacked on shelves and Emma's art projects taped to the refrigerator and a bathroom cabinet full of shampoo bottles that cost more than she used to spend on groceries for an entire month. Aria was 3 weeks into her paralegal certification program, studying at the kitchen table while Emma completed homework beside her. The scars on her back still existed, still caught the light when she showered, but she no longer wore long sleeves to hide them. She wore tank tops in summer and said nothing when people looked. Giovanni came to dinner 3 times a week. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Always at 6 o'clock. Always with something: groceries, books for Emma, once a piano because Emma had mentioned that the girl at school had lessons and it sounded beautiful. "You cannot just buy a piano," Aria had said, laughing despite herself. "Already bought," Giovanni replied. "Tuned it yesterday. Teacher comes Saturday mornings." He said it with such casual certainty that Aria had stopped arguing. It was on a Wednesday afternoon, not a scheduled day, which meant something was wrong, when Emma ran into the kitchen screaming, "Why is Daddy hurting Mommy?" Aria froze. Giovanni was standing directly behind her, his arm around her throat from behind, demonstrating a chokehold escape. To an 8-year-old seeing only the surface of things, it looked like violence. Giovanni released her immediately. He dropped to Emma's eye level with such speed that his knee cracked audibly against the tile. I am teaching Mommy how to protect herself, he said, his voice steady and patient. So that nobody can ever hurt her again. I would never hurt her, pick cola. Never. Mommy is teaching me too how to be better, and I am teaching her how to be strong. That is what love is. Making each other strong. Aria kneeled beside him, taking Emma's small hands. Daddy is keeping me safe. Just like you're safe here. Just like we keep each other safe. Emma processed this with the serious expression of a child who had known real danger. Then, can you teach me too? Giovanni's eyes met Aria's over Emma's head, asking permission silently. She nodded. After that, Sunday afternoons became self-defense training in the living room. Giovanni taught them both how to break a hold, how to make themselves large, how to trust their own strength. Vinny and Dario watched from the kitchen doorway, shaking their heads in amused disbelief while Emma laughed and tried to throw Giovanni, her 9-year-old frame determined against his deliberately unresisting weight. The final piece came by phone call. 30 seconds. Giovanni stood in his office, spoke into the handset, listened, spoke again, then hung up. He called Aria immediately. The adoption papers, he said. Expedited. Final. You are her legal mother, Aria. Independent of me. Even if something happens to me, and something always happens to men like me eventually, she stays with you. That is secured. Aria cried when the papers arrived. She held them while Emma slept against her shoulder and Giovanni sat across from them in the darkening apartment, his expensive coat draped over the chair, his expensive watch catching the last light of day. He looked ordinary like this. Almost human. Almost safe. You earned this, he said quietly. You saved her life. You saved mine. No, Aria whispered. We saved each other. If you believed in this story of mutual rescue and second chances, please drop a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe because tomorrow we have another story about family built in the most unexpected places. Comment below, do you believe in mutual rescue? We read every single comment. No matter how hard life gets, remember that after the rain, the sky clears. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We will see you again in the next video.